So the selection of the proper system is a very important part because the speed of decision making is very much based on the system we choose. If our decisions are made on actual costing system, when we use only actual data for decision making, it would be quite a long time between data are collected, analyzed, and decisions are made. So this gap will give us some negative um, matters, because while we are analyzing data and prepare the basis for decision making, our competitors will be faster and our decisions will be a bit late than the market situation. And in that case, actual costing system is good enough from the point of view of relevance and based on concrete data, but it is very slow, and it is not very good for many decisions we have to make every day. That's why people decided to develop specific systems based on normal costing system, when our direct materials and direct labor are chosen as actual values and overhead is the budgeted value. Because in that case, we need not spend many time to calculate the concrete overhead amount. We can use the predetermined overhead rate, and our decision will be faster. So in that case, because to collect data regarding the indirect expenses is a very expensive task and a very time-consuming task. That's why normal costing system is based on budgeted overhead data. And standard costing system, if it is applied, it uses only standards as a basis for budgeting, and only after the period is ended, companies are evaluating the differences between our standard values and actual values. Decisions in those cases are quite fast, but the relevance of the data analysis is a bit lower because not always our standard material use, standard production, and standard labor use are really the same as our actual values, because of the negative features of forecasting. So you know that forecasting is only a specific guess regarding future based on some data, but in that case the relevance of this analysis would be a bit lower, but the speed is quite good. Normal costing varies from standard costing in that standard costing used entirely predetermined costs for all the aspects of a product, while normal costing uses actual costs for the material and labor components. So we use the standard costing system under the assumption that it should be incurred to produce the good or service under anticipated conditions. So we assume that our conditions are stable enough, and we do not see the sufficient differences between our current conditions and previous conditions. So to know more about this topic, I suggest you to read two really good articles. They are free. You may use these names and search for the internet. The first one is the costing assignment approaches. So here you can see the analysis that involves three basic costing system: normative costing, standard costing, and actual costing. So the analysis is very good and lots of examples are presented. And the second article is really fresh, just a year ago it was published. The differences between standard costing and normal costing method of manufacturing operating income calculation. So here you can see the concrete cases of calculation in order to choose between different costing systems. So what are real businesses doing with those costing systems? How do they choose between normative and normal and standard costing methods? And what is the final outcome of these decisions? So you can read in those papers. So please download it from the given addresses and read. So I think it's shortly all about the normative costing. During the practical session, we will discuss a bit more about costing systems and whether you have specific questions related to this topic. Is it clear why do we need the normative costing system? Whether it's clear why do we need this standard costing system, and how do you think what industries can mostly use the standard costing system, the normative and the actual? Could you make some guess where it is relevant to use the actual costing system, in what cases? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So actual costing system we may use if our data flow is not very intensive. If we want, if we can analyze every value we have, so actual costing system is good enough for small production companies, for service companies, when they cannot associate the flow of the cost directly to the flow of the services or the flow of individual or customized goods. So actual costing is good in all the cases in which overhead is not predictable, or the rate of prediction is very low. So if the difference between actual overhead and our predicted overhead is big, and we cannot say exactly what would be our predetermined rate, so we can use only actual system. And if we produce and sell only customized products, it would be better to base the decisions on actual data only. So normative costing may be used by companies where products are somehow standardized. For example, they have the basic product line, and these standard products could be a little bit customized with the use of small operations, and the manufacturing overhead has big variations, but could be direct labor and direct materials could be driving this overhead, and we can calculate the overhead rate very close to the real situation. And the standard costing is really good enough for automatic production cases, for process costing, method when we have a very fast flow of standardized goods, some liquid goods and services that are standardized very well, and we can easily predict our standard direct labor, standard overhead value. So in that case, a standard costing is good enough because we need to make decisions quite fast, and the difference between standard costing, and actual data would be not very big. So starting from this point, let's move to our new topic. If you have no questions related to the previous one. So any questions? So if you have no questions, let's move to the next topic, which is divided to two lectures. Strategic management accounting. So it's a very important part of management accounting that summarizes all the previous information we have, and also the information from financial accounting, strategic management, and operational management. So let's see what is included. So now we are moving from our second block to the block number 3. And today we plan to get familiar with short-term decisions to exploit new opportunities to create or preserve value within the organization. So these short-term decisions are based on budgets and our costing system analysis. So let's move to the first question and discuss why it is important to calculate budget variances and how to use them in analysis and control. If we will look at the CMAR documents, we will see that strategic management accounting is defined as the topic about having an accounting system that checks, accommodates, supports, and controls strategic management goals. So it means that management accounting presented in those parts are supporting strategic decisions, and they are really useful for controlling how our strategic management goals are achieved or not achieved, and looking for the reasons why they are not achieved as we planned, for example. And strategic management accounting, if we will use the definition prepared by CIMA, is consisting of 5 basic modules. First of all, it is the costing module, the benchmarking, the strategic pricing, budgeting and forecasting, and competitor cost assessment. So these 5 modules are basis for specific decisions. The first 4 are summarized together in a special block of objectives related to variance analysis and control. And today we plan to discuss this block, how to calculate variances, how to analyze them, how to use them for controlling function, and how to use it for future budgeting. So for creating budgets for the future. You know that the work of management is consisting of several basic steps, and now we are moving to the next step, which is named as control. So it summarizes several objectives, for example, evaluate performance of the organization and individual, and measure those performance in order to understand how can we choose our system in order to better satisfy the strategic and tactic goals. So control involves the steps taken by management that attempt to ensure that objectives are attained, or to ensure the reasons why our objectives are not attained. Variance analysis is very sufficient part of control. Variance analysis is consisting of 5 basic steps, if we do not count the preparation of performance reports, and we can summarize those steps into the variance analysis cycle. This cycle starts from the beginning at this step, we prepare performance reports in order to evaluate the current state of nature and evaluate the potential changes that we have to make. Then we analyze variances between our actual data and our budgeted data. Then we raise questions, for example, why our budget is overused or underused, looking for the specific position. For example, what helped us to um, over overcome the budgeted value for sales. So what is this driving force that help us to sell more than we planned in our budget? Or why our cost is bigger than we planned, or why our overhead is bigger than we used for budget allocation. So when we raise questions, it would be helpful to identify root causes. So what does it mean? Identify root causes means that we have to find uh, the initial force that influence on the specific budget variance and make it favorable or unfavorable for our business. So in this very step, we identify the basic reason why our sales are bigger than we planned, um, approving our current budget. For example, market situation is changed and our prices rise, and that's why our sales are now bigger than we planned a year ago, for example. In that case, we can see that the market situation influence our actual data and analyze the um, direction of this influence and decide what to do to increase our prediction abilities for the next year. Then we take some actions. When we identify the root cause, we have to take some action. If we decide that our forecasting is not good enough as our sales are bigger than we forecasted a year ago, we may take special actions to increase the forecasting power within the organization. For example, we may find the specific industrial association and purchase several reports from this association in order to learn our industry better, in order to get familiar with specific trends before our competitors will do this. So we may do some actions to make the situation improved for the next period. And starting from this point, we conduct next period's operations. We decide to use some more relevant techniques to increase the prediction power of our budget for the next period and predict our sales with more precise uh, ability, and therefore make this production process more predictable and more reasonable. So this variance analysis cycle is made on each step of the budgeting process. So each line in the budget should be analyzed using this variance analysis cycle in order to get the full scope of information why our budget is fulfilled or is not fulfilled, and in what cases we can make our predictions closer to current situation. So the standard here is the budgeted amount against which actual results are compared, and differences between budgeted and actual amounts are referred to as budget variances, which are reported on performance reports. So if, for example, materials differences between actual cost and budgeted cost emerge, management should investigate the reasons and should create some plans in order to keep our material use in the specific within the specific limits. So I think the idea why do we use variance analysis is clear, and we can move to the next slide. So as we can see from previous classes and from the book chapter, um, standard cost is used for most types of budgets. And standard cost is the cost of a single unit. So we decide what should be the cost of our single unit. And standard cost is usually the theoretical construct which is positioned somewhere between our current attainable value and some ideal standard. For example, if we can produce a sheet of paper using specific, I don't know, 2 grams of viscose, but the world record or ideal standard is 1.5, we may analyze our budget variances and our actual variation, of produced sheets, for example, and we can decide what should be our standard value. If our fluctuations around this mean value are quite um, um, big and coefficient of variation is sufficient, we may increase this mean value by a specific percentage to create the standard cost. If our variation is small enough and almost all our paper sheets are identical, we may select the standard cost of a single unit close to our actual value, because we cannot um, we cannot find our cost quite far from the actual data, as our variation is low. So standard costs therefore should be developed within the organization or within the industry. So you may use not only the corporative standards, but also the industry standards and some technical standards that are accepted by specific countries or specific economics, because some standard costs are really sufficient for social and environmental questions. For example, if we produce oil, if we refine oil, it may be sufficient for environmental support or for social living standards to have the specific cost of a standard unit, which is probably increased due to special expenses made to achieve this sustainability towards environmental sustainability or social sustainability. So a standard cost may summarize all the expenses we need to make in order to produce the unit of product. So here you can see the example of the standard cost card. The cost card is the document that helps us to evaluate the standard cost per unit. So we can see these two basic indicators that help us to produce the standard cost per unit. The first part is the standard quantity, and the second is the standard price. So the price standard is the rate, this is the variable portion of the predetermined overhead rate. So how much does it cost to produce this unit of product? And standard quantity is the special quantity of material or of labor. It represents the activity in the allocation base for predetermined overhead. So total standard unit cost will be calculated as the standard quantity multiplied by standard price or standard rate for the specific unit. And standard cost per unit doesn't obligatory means that if we pay, for example, $54.5, we can produce every unit we plan to produce. Some units may be produced using less cost, and some units can be produced using more, but in average it could be very close to our standard unit cost. And of course, if we will use some perspective management and production systems, we can make our standard unit cost and our actual unit cost closer. For example, the Six Sigma management system is deciding to meet two positions like standard unit cost and actual unit cost, and they are developing special set of actions in order to make those values closer, and therefore the budget of those companies are more close to they are more close to our actual data, and therefore the production process is more predictable and purchase process is more predictable, and of course it's a very good idea to analyze the standard unit cost in comparison with the actual unit cost. But there are some advantages of standard costing that we can meet using this approach. First of all, standard costs are key elements of the management by exemption approach. So in that case, management can focus on sufficient tasks only and do not think about insufficient small questions. Standards can provide benchmarks that promote economy and efficiency. So standards could be some specific ideal examples that could be used to reduce waste and reduce unnecessary used materials, reduce damaged items, and so on. So standards can provide the best practices and motivate our companies and departments to work better to achieve better productivity, higher productivity and efficiency. Standards can also greatly simplify bookkeeping, because if we have standards, we can make some specific operations in the progress, in the process of production, and at the end of the period, we can make only necessary adjustments. But if our process is stable enough, those adjustments are smaller than the usual set of operations, and that will save our time. The last one is that standards can support responsibility accounting systems. So we discussed with the previous with our groups on Monday that responsibility accounting is very specific issue that is used to increase profitability because we can select the responsibility centers and organize our work in an efficient way in order to increase the profitability. So standards can support this responsibility accounting, and we can split the basic standards to the responsibility center standards, and each responsibility center would be responsible for specific set of standards, and this make the situation a bit better in comparison with the actual costing system. But there we can find some potential problems. First of all, standard cost variance reports are usually prepared on a monthly basis and may contain information that is outdated. For example, if our standards are violated due to the inconsistent technical condition of our equipment, for example, or materials, So we will know about this too late. Because many products will be also produced and part of them could be damaged, but we may face with this problem quite late. The second potential problem is that if variances are misused as a club to negatively reinforce employees, morale may suffer and employees may make dysfunctional decisions. For example, if we use variances to punish our employees and managers, so they may use those standards um, to disturb the normal improvement process and just formally satisfy standards. They may do not create the better products they only can, but they could simply satisfy standards from the formal size, and that's it. It is quite difficult to identify whether our standards are satisfied on a formal basis or with a great attention to details and quality. And sometimes we assume that our process is disturbed quite late, while the motivation system is already almost damaged and our employees are demotivated, and it would be quite dangerous for the production process in total. The next problem that may occur, labor variances assume that the production process is labor-paced and the labor is a variable cost. These assumptions are often invalid in today's automated manufacturing environment, where employees are essentially a fixed cost. For example, if our process is automated and we need only a couple of employees to look whether our automated system is functioning quite well. So of course the salaries would be fixed expenses, but we may consider them to be variable. So it should be audited quite seriously in order to understand whether this problem is related to our production. Just meeting standards may not be sufficient. Continuous improvement may be necessary to survive in a competitive environment. So, motivation plus formal using the standards may lead us um, to the formal fulfillment of the requirements, and our products may lose the competitive position on a market. As other companies are using the continuous improvement systems like Toyota production system or balance scorecard management system, and those management systems provide better results than just the use of standard costing system. But the standard costing system, of course, may be the key part of this continuous improvement if we calculate those standards not on a formal basis but using the competitive advantage of our firm, using the involvement of every member to the production process and using these benefits of the continuous improvement system. I think during the next lecture we will see how those production systems would help us to increase the profitability of the company and how they are related with the standard cost. In some cases, a favorable variance can be as bad or worse than an unfavorable. And this statement we will activate a bit later today after a couple of slides. And the last potential problem that could be met using standard costing. Excessive emphasis of meeting the standards may overshadow other important objectives such as maintaining and improving quality, on-time delivery, and customer satisfaction. For example, if we standardize everything, we may lose those sufficient indicators. And for example, the achievement of the standard cost would be more preferable than the customer satisfaction. And finally, our customers will lose the interest to our products. For example, looking for the, I don't know, our school education, we can see that for the latest 10 years, we implemented lots of educational standards, but finally, our customer satisfaction became very low. And the only thing that keeps the situation within the specific limits is that the school education is the obligatory part for every citizen of the country. Otherwise, if we will do the same with the production process, I think we will lose all our customers. So we are speaking about differences or variances, and let's see some specific terms that are used. If we speak about actual revenue, it means that this is a revenue from our historical data from our income statement. Flexible budget revenue or budget revenue is the revenue from the budget of any type, and the difference is the revenue variance. So the revenue variance is just the difference between actual and budgeted revenue. So the difference is actually means that we have to extract one value from the previous value. So actual cost and budget cost, and the difference is the spending variance. So the spending variance is just the difference between actual and budget cost. So I think these terms are quite clear. Are they clear? That to find the difference means to calculate actual minus budget. So actually, variances may have three basic causes. It may be ill-conceived, so from the beginning, conditions have changed. So if our market conditions are changed and we do not notice it, job performance is high or low. So these causes are driving almost all variances we have. Variances should be investigated, and management by exception is an approach that is economical and often used. It means that under this approach, only exceptional variances are investigated. For example, if our revenue variance is equal to 1% of the total revenue, and the sufficient or exceptional variance is considered to be starting from 5%, it means that we do not analyze it at all. So we just calculate and see that our variance lies within the specific limits, and we do not need to examine the root causes for the change of the variance and make other actions included into the variance analysis cycle. Why it is made as written on this slide? Because the budget variance analysis is a time-consuming operation, and of course, if we would be using the full analysis cycle, looking for each line of the budget, it would be quite slow and time-consuming to analyze all the variances we have. But if we are using the management by exception, we may analyze only exceptional variances, only sufficient variances. For example, we can see that our revenue variance is 15% negative, or our cost is 7% positive. And summarizing those two exceptional variances, we may find out that our management system is not good for the continuous improvement process, that our standard costing method stops the process uh, of making our products better, and our standards are demotivating our employees. And those exceptional variances will show us the immediate state of nature. It will show us the potential problems that may be related to those values and so on. But of course, if it is so big, it should be analyzed using the full scope of steps in order to understand the underlying reason for the variance being exceptional, and understand the decisions that are related to those variances. So the variances that we have considered are sales volume, sales price, direct material use, direct material price, direct labor efficiency, labor rate, and fixed overhead spending. So these 7 directions are the basic directions for variance analysis. So here we will be using 2 basic terms like a static budget and flexible budget, or flexible budget. A static budget is the budget that we have been signed a year ago, at the 1st of January probably, and it is completed when the year is over. So a static budget is not adjusted for the actual level of production. So we have approved our static budget, and in the end of the period, we compare our static budget values with the actual value. That's it. A flexible budget is a set of budget relationships that can be adjusted to various activity levels. For example, we decided to produce 100 items at the beginning of the year. We have calculated all the budgeted income statements. We have prepared the budgeted balance sheet, and we can see in the progress that our goods are not competitive anymore. And we decided in the middle of the year to stop the production of the item A, for example, and start to produce the item B. And therefore, we have to recalculate our budget. We should make it more flexible in order to satisfy the current conditions. So we took this static budget and recalculate all the values related to the production of the product A and to the production of the product B, and create a new budget in the middle of the year because our production have been changed sufficiently. So a flexible budget, therefore, is not a static document signed and approved, but it is the set of budget relationships. If it's necessary to make some sufficient changes, we have to make it and include into the flexible budget. Let's see the example. This is a small business, Larry's Loan Service, that provides loan care in a planned community where all loans are approximately the same size. So we can standardize something like the unit cost, for example. At the end of the period, Larry prepared his budget based on moving 500 loans. So since all the loans are similar in size, Larry felt that the number of loans moved in a month would be the best way to measure overall activity for his business. And therefore, his budget is like you can see on a slide. Revenue and the cost formula are given. So number of loans that are used, 500. Therefore, revenue is 75 multiplied by 500, and all the expenses are listed, and net operating income is calculated. So this is a static planning budget. Every time we start the budget process, we create the static planning budget. When the period is over, Larry decided to analyze actual results. Finally, he realized that a number of loans that were used for service is bigger, 550 instead of 500, and therefore revenue and expenses are changed. If we will compare our actual results and planning static budget, we can see that there are some differences, some variances. Most of them are marked green and some of them are marked red. So those green are favorable variances that occur when actual revenue is greater than the budgeted revenue. So you can see that $33,000 is bigger than $37,500, and therefore our variance is favorable. Red are unfavorable variances that occurs when actual costs are greater than budgeted costs. So we spend more, and therefore this variance is unfavorable because we do not plan to spend so a big amount for this. So favorable variance may occur when our actual costs are less than the budgeted costs. So we can register the favorable variance as well. And for some expenses, we can see that the difference is equal to 0 because our actual results are equal to planning budget results. Since these variants are unfavorable, has Larry done a poor job controlling cost? And since our green marked green variances are favorable, has Larry done a good job controlling costs? How do you think? Is it good or bad to have favorable variances, for example, for revenue and unfavorable for cost? Can Larry say that I have done bad job because my difference is unfavorable, my variance is unfavorable. I paid more than I planned. It is a good conclusion from this analysis. How do you think? Okay. So we can say that it would be the correct conclusion if the amount of, if the number of loans will be still the same. If the actual level of activity is the same as the planned level of activity included into the budget, this is a good conclusion. Yes, we have overcome our expenses budget, and therefore it's unfavorable. But this question is not, this conclusion is not relevant if our level of activity is changed. In that case, the relevant question is how much of the cost variances are due to the higher activity and how much are due to the cost control. So we need to flex our budget and decide whether Larry spent more than he planned because he had to provide the service for extra 50 loans per month, or he spent more because he overused the cost in comparison with the budgeted values. So to answer this question, we have to recalculate our budget volumes using our new data. Therefore, Larry's flexible budget will be as following. The flexible budget value is the value of his actual number of loans, and therefore all the expenses should be recalculated using for the current level of activity. And finally, our flexible budget variances are shown here, could be analyzed in comparison with the actual and budget number of activities. So as number of loans are equal in current case, we can say that yes, Larry paid more wages and salaries that it is relevant according to his flexible budget. Larry spent less for equipment maintenance, and that's a good outcome because he provided some economy of the equipment maintenance cost, yes, and spent less. And finally, net operating income difference is unfavorable because flexible budget net operating income is bigger than his actual net operating income. And that's why it's unfavorable. So we have to recalculate all these budget values and use the same number of activities to understand whether the variance is favorable or unfavorable. So let's answer the very small question about the example. Okay, are there any answers, or I have only so the answer should be as following: the total wages and salaries cost is equal to 23,000 units. This amount is good for 600 loans to be included into the flexible budget. So if we increase the number of activities, the budgeted values should be recalculated. So budgetary control, as you can see, is a very important part of the firm's activity. Quantitative analysis is necessary to make in comparison with the so quantitative analysis should be done to compare our actual results with budgeted results, and for better understanding of the process, and for better understanding of our spending that we make using our resources and making our goods and services. But some questions are behind of quantitative analysis. These questions are ethical considerations and behavior of main participants of the process. And these questions are also very important and should be analyzed in order to increase the company's profitability. Because you know that the behavioral aspects are very closely related to the productivity of our employees and managerial staff, and therefore not only quantitative analysis should be included into budgetary control, but some ethical questions and the behavior analysis. So there may be some conflict in planning and control of budgets. Conflict is inherent in planning and control uses of budget. Top management would like managers responsible for carrying out plans also participate in budgeting. However, because the management performance is evaluated in relation to the budget, managers have an incentive to build slack into their budgets. That is, budgets can easily achieve. So they could participate in budgeting and create the budget that is easy to achieve and therefore to obtain the extra bonus while the real profitability of the company is not increasing. And this is a basic conflict in planning and controlling. So if we decide to use the other approach and involve into the planning the budget committee, which is not the which is not involved into the performance of these operations and into the realization of the production process, and this could arise the other conflict that this budget committee may create the budget without the knowing the situation in details, and therefore the budget would be the formal document but not connected very well with the current situation or within the organization. So both methods are used on firms, and both methods could drive the specific conflict. And I suppose this is not possible to it's not possible to create the budget without any conflicts. But each company should have specific methods to solve these conflicts. So for the solving basic budgetary control purpose conflicts, we may use special budgetary control system and create intermediate reports that are spread within the organization and outside of the organization. And these budgetary control may use two basic functional systems. First, the first system is the feedback system. According to this system, steps are taken to get operations back on track as soon as there is a signal that they have done wrong. So feedback is provided by the participants of the process in order to highlight the problem that is occurred at the moment, and provide the reaction for this problem as fast as we only can. And feed forward is a special budgetary control system that is using predictions to what can go wrong and what steps may be used to avoid such problem or to neutralize the undesirable outcome. So feed forward is mostly the forecasting based on quantitative analysis and behavior analysis. For example, what will happen if our employees won't close the safe properly after the working day? What will happen? Of course, if we will be modeling the situation, we will exactly know that someone will steal the money from the open safe or steal the specific documents from it. So it's not a good example of a feed-forward system, of course, but I think it's understood very well. Actually, on firms, feed-forward system is a complicated system that could include statistical analysis, financial analysis, management accounting, HR analysis using the employees' evaluation system and employees motivation system. So feed forward is a very big and complicated system that can help us to predict the outcomes of the specific actions we make. So these two systems could be used to avoid uncontrollable variances between actual and budgeted values. And feedback is a very good system which involves everyone who is the part of the production system. For example, if our employees are motivated quite well, they may notice small cases of incompletenesses, small cases of not properly made products, and report to management or supervisors those very small cases that in future may lead to some sufficient problems. So to make all this system live, we need to have well-trained employees, first of all, to provide the feed-forward system live, and good connection between management and employees to make this feedback system live. If their relationships within the organizations are quite formal and people do not have some attitude to discuss their own problems, all these systems are not working very well, and company couldn't use the benefits of the system. So how to analyze variances from technical point of view? Let's start with the quantitative analysis. First of all, we start with sales variances. As we usually start the budgeting process with the sales budget, we start quantitative analysis with the analysis of sales variances. So why do sales variances exist? First of all, due to poor performance by sales staff, by deterioration in market conditions, lack of goods or services to sell as a result of some production problem, or as a result of some prediction which is made to create a budget. For example, if we know exactly that we can produce and sell 100 items, but in our budget we have included only 80 items, it means that the bad forecasting system make our budget irrelevant, and therefore sales variances may occur. Sales price variance may occur because of the poor performance by sales staff as well, and differences in market conditions. Direct materials and overhead variance may be split between three basic options. First of all, direct material usage, direct material price variance, and fixed overhead variance. And reasons you can see on the screen, and they are also related to those basic issues. How to calculate the material price variance? Let's see the calculation example. For example, we decide to analyze the dress company that used 1,000 yards of fabric during the month, and the budgeted price for the fabric was $5 a yard, and the actual price was $3. So the formula to calculate the material price variance is presented on the screen. We can see that we use actual price, a standard price, and actual quality of material purchased. And we can conclude that if actual price is bigger than standard price, then the variance is unfavorable. So if we purchase our material using standard higher prices that we assumed to use, so the variance is unfavorable. So how do you think, and under what condition our unfavorable variance may be favorable, or in what case our favorable material price variance is not so good as we assumed. So it means that when we can conclude that the positive difference is favorable between budgeted and actual. So actually, the only reason here is that if the quality of material is still the same. So this price, which is price variance, which is calculated in the screen, is favorable only in case the quality of the fabric is the same as we used for our budgeting. Material quantity variance is analyzed using the specific formula presented. If company thought it would need 7 yards of fabric at $6 a yard for the product, but they only needed 5 yards, the variance is equal to 2 yards multiplied by $6. So it means that we have to use the same price and calculate the difference in usage. So controllable overhead variance is calculated as the actual overhead minus flexible budget level of overhead for actual level of production. If actual is bigger than budget, then the variance is unfavorable. If actual is smaller, so the variance is favorable. But we have to monitor what is included into this actual overhead and decide whether our budget variance is favorable or not. For example, a company budgets for the allocation of 25,000 of fixed overhead cost to produce goods at the rate of 50 per unit produced, with the expectation that 500 units will be produced. However, the actual number of units produced is 600, but not 5. So a total overhead is $30,000 as the overhead cost is fixed. So that creates a fixed overhead volume variance of $5,000. And the overhead volume variance is expressed as flexible budget level of overhead for actual level of production minus overhead applied to production using standard overhead rate. And this variance is solely the product of more or less units being produced that planned in the static budget. Its usefulness is limited because our fixed overhead volume is not related to the number of units we produce. But in case we have the variable overhead volume, so it would be sufficient. If we decide to analyze labor variance, we would have two basic approaches. First of all, to analyze labor efficiency and to analyze labor rate. So labor efficiency has more reasons for variations, and labor rate is mostly technical issue related with the poor performance by the human resources department because we do not have enough employees to cover all the vacancies we have and to use necessary labor in our production process. So labor rate variance is analyzed using the formula from the screen and taking into account our example with the firm which is producing dresses. So if this company thought it would need 20 labor hours at 30 per hour, for a product but only needed 16 hours, the variance is 4 multiplied by 30 or $120. So we can calculate this labor rate variance as the difference in cost of labor. So that's why firms decide to purchase our labor using the lower price in order to have the positive variance and therefore the economy on this labor use. So labor efficiency variance, if we will make a closer look, may be unfavorable due to this several reasons. First of all, it would be poorly trained workers. If they have no enough skills, they may create the same product quite slow or slower than their neighbors, or they could make more mistakes that we need to fix, and they may make damaged products or waste, and that's why this poorly training is a very serious reason for unfavorable efficiency variances and should be eliminated. Poor materials quality. If our employees are trained very well, they cannot produce normal items from low quality materials. For example, if our firm that decided to sew dresses will purchase using the lower prices some material of lower quality, so we need to spend more hours to create something very good from this lower quality fabric. And that's why poor quality of materials on the first glance is not related to the labor efficiency, but if we need to create something using lower quality materials, it would lead to the loss of efficiency because we need more time to make our products from a lower quality materials. Poor supervision of workers is also the reason of unfavorable efficiency variance. If our supervision is not good enough, our workers may not know where they are not correct, where to use specific materials, what mistakes they are making during the process, and many important things are not clear for workers if they are not if they are poorly supervised. Poorly maintained equipment is also the source of efficiency loss because if our equipment is maintained not very well, it is stopped very often and we need to fix it quite often, and that's why we cannot produce items during this time of fixation, and therefore it will lead to unfavorable efficiency variance. So if we are speaking about labor efficiency variable, it's not always about employees. It's not always about management of those employees or supervision of those employees. It may also um, take into account different issues like poor material quality, poor maintained equipment, and many others. And if we decide to split the responsibility for labor variances, it may be quite a complicated issue because no one wants to take the responsibility for bad results. But anyway, at the beginning of the business, you have to split exactly the responsibility for labor variances. So how to measure the labor efficiency loss due to the poorly fixed equipment, for example, or due to poor quality of materials. So we have to split those signals from the poorly trained employees and something which some reasons which are really related to the quality of labor force. So it's not a very simple issue. How to calculate the labor efficiency variance? So we have to take the actual number of hours worked and standard number of hours worked and multiply the difference by the standard labor wage rate. And let's see the example at the left side of the screen. A production of one dress requires 3 hours of labor. A company produced 10,000 dresses and utilized 29,500 hours of labor for the same. So the hourly labor rate is 3. So we can calculate the labor efficiency variance as a favorable variance, which is equal to 1,500. I think it's clear. To finish our today's lecture, I want to with this very slide when favorable variances may be unfavorable. So the first step in variance analysis is to decide whether the variance is significant from the quantitative point of view. If it is significant, what is its cause? So what is the reason of occurrence of this variance? Once the reason is known, corrective action can be taken if necessary and if possible. If our action will help us to avoid such problems in future, so I think it could be done. And if it is due to a supply shortage, for example, no action is needed and the company will have to wait until market conditions improve, for example. If the variance is judged insignificant, no further steps are needed. But in some cases, favorable doesn't mean that it should not be investigated. Raw materials are good examples of this phenomenon, especially considering the competitive pricing environment for most commodities. If, for example, we have the favorable variance for raw materials, we may investigate why do we have these variance. If we purchase materials of lower quality, it's not a favorable difference. It's this is a difference which would be covered with the cost of quality in future. And of course, our benefit is not so clearly seen. Maybe we will spend more time for fixing those in condition, for facing some defects, for making our products more stable. We will spend more time and money than our variance is. So in that case, the variance is not favorable at all. So, of course, we may focus not only on the value of this variance, not only on the sign of this variance, but also on the specific features that we will have in future. So the feed-forward system should be used here in order to understand whether our favorable means favorable in reality. So I think at this very moment we will stop. Thank you for coming and see you on practical sessions. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye. Bye. Thank you.